She built a $9 billion company on a single drop of blood. And not one of those drops told the truth. Elizabeth Holmes promised something the entire medical world said couldn't be done. 1 finger prick, 200 tests, no needles, no lab coats, no waiting room. For 12 years, investors, presidents, 4-star generals, a former Secretary of State, they all believed her. They were wrong. All of them. This is the story of how a Stanford dropout sold Silicon Valley a miracle that didn't exist. How a major pharmacy chain sent real patients to a machine that produced fake results. And how the truth finally arrived. In a federal courtroom in San Jose. Here's what nobody talks about. The fraud wasn't subtle. It wasn't buried in a footnote. It was running on the shelves of Walgreens for years, while the people who could have stopped it just kept writing checks. This is Theranos, 2003. Elizabeth Holmes is 19 years old. She walks out of Stanford after 1 semester and tells her parents she's going to change healthcare forever. She has an idea and a name. Theranos, a blend of therapy and diagnosis. The pitch is simple, almost too simple. You prick your finger, a single drop of blood goes into a small device. They call it the Edison. And in minutes, you get a full panel. Cholesterol, cancer markers, hormones, everything. No more vials, no more needles, no more $1,000 bills from the lab. For investors, this isn't a product pitch, it's a religion. And Holmes, black turtleneck, deep voice, unbroken eye contact, she looks the part. The money pours in. Tim Draper, Larry Ellison, the Walton family. Rupert Murdoch personally writes a check for $125 million. By 2014, the company is worth $9 billion. Holmes herself is worth $4.5 billion. On paper. Forbes puts her on the cover. The youngest self-made female billionaire in history. But the real currency wasn't money. It was credibility. Look at that board. George Shultz, former Secretary of State. Henry Kissinger. James Mattis, the 4-star Marine General. Senators, admirals, diplomats. You know what none of them had? A single day of experience running a clinical lab. That was the trick. Holmes didn't fill the room with scientists who could ask hard questions. She filled it with statesmen who wouldn't. And in 2013, Walgreens signs the deal. Theranos blood centers open inside real pharmacies. In Phoenix, in Palo Alto. Real patients walk in. Real blood goes into real machines. Real reports go to real doctors. None of it worked. Inside the lab, employees already know. They know the Edison device can't do what Holmes says it can. They know the readings drift. They know quality control samples fail and get rerun until they pass. But here's the most damning part. Most of the actual blood tests aren't running on the Edison at all. They're running on standard Siemens machines. The same machines every regular lab uses. And the results, diluted, modified, often unreliable, they're getting relabeled, stamped Theranos run. That's not innovation. That's a label printer. But this is Silicon Valley. Employees who speak up get NDAs and lawyers. Some get followed. One whistleblower, Tyler Schultz, the grandson of George Shultz himself, he gets threatened by his own grandfather's company, by his own grandfather's friends. And then John Carreyrou picks up the phone, October 2015. The Wall Street Journal publishes Carreyrou's investigation. The headline is plain. The reporting is devastating. Theranos is running fewer than 15 tests on its own technology. Not the 200 Holmes had claimed, not even close. The rest are running on machines anyone can buy. Holmes goes on mad money. She says Carreyrou is wrong. She says the company stands by its technology. She says the future is still single-drop blood testing, and Theranos is still leading it. None of that was true either. The federal regulators move next. CMS, the agency that oversees clinical labs, they walk into the Theranos facility in Newark, California. What they find isn't a question of innovation versus tradition. They find a lab posing immediate jeopardy to patient health. Think about that for a second. Patients had been told they had cancer markers they didn't have, pregnancy results that were wrong, thyroid readings that pushed doctors toward the wrong medication. Real harm, real people. Real diagnoses based on numbers that came out of a machine nobody could trust. After the WSJ expose, the dominoes fall fast. Walgreens pulls out. The partnership ends. Theranos blood centers close. Every one of them. The SEC charges Holmes with massive fraud in March 2018. The agency says she raised more than $700 million from investors through deception. She settles the civil case, pays a $500,000 penalty, gives up her voting control of the company, agrees she won't serve as an officer or director of a public company for 10 years. But the criminal case is still coming. September 2018. Theranos dissolves. The labs shut down. The Edison machines, the ones that were supposed to revolutionize medicine, they get crated up and walked out the door. Then come the trials. Hundreds of witnesses, mountains of documents. In January 2022, the jury comes back, guilty on 4 counts of defrauding investors. Holmes is convicted of lying to the people who wrote the checks. The jury splits on the patient fraud counts. They can't agree on whether she meant to harm the patients themselves. But the verdict is clear enough. November 2022. A federal judge in San Jose sentences Elizabeth Holmes to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison. Her partner, Sunny Balwani, the company's number 2, he gets nearly 13 years for his role. In May 2023, Holmes reports to FPC Bryan, a low-security federal prison camp in Texas. The girl who walked out of Stanford at 19, 20 years later, she walks into a prison cell. The company that was once worth $9 billion is worth nothing. Investors lost everything. Walgreens alone wrote off $140 million on the deal. And the patients got something worse than money back. They got the bills, the false results, and in some cases, real medical consequences. The Edison didn't fail because the science was hard. The Edison failed because it never worked at all. So what's the autopsy here? It's tempting to say this was about one person, one charismatic founder, one bad apple in a system that mostly works. That's the lie. Theranos didn't happen because Elizabeth Holmes was uniquely deceptive. Theranos happened because every guardrail in the system bent for her. The investors didn't demand audited validation studies. They demanded a slot on the cap table. The board didn't ask the right scientific questions. They posed for the magazine cover. The pharmacy chain didn't run independent verification of the technology. it ran a press release. The Wall Street Journal did, eventually, what venture capital, the board, the partners, and the regulators were supposed to do all along. One reporter, one newspaper, one investigation. That's what it took. So here's the lesson. It isn't that you should be skeptical of charismatic founders. The lesson is this. When a company scales its narrative faster than its technology can prove itself, somebody, somewhere, is paying for the gap. In Theranos' case, it was the patients. She built a $9 billion company on a single drop of blood. And not one of those drops told the truth.